Dear colleagues, we bring to your attention the results of an interdisciplinary study on the topic Application of Augmented Reality Technologies in the Development of Constructive Coping Strategies for Internally Displaced People. As a result of the full-scale invasion of the territory of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, the number of internally displaced people has increased significantly from 1.5 million in 2018 to 4.6 million in 2022, who were forced to seek refuge in safe regions of our country. At the end of 2022, a sociological survey was conducted among forcibly displaced people from the occupied part of Zaporizhia region. At the end of 2022, a sociological survey was conducted among forcibly displaced people from the occupied part of Zaporizhia region. Among the 60,000 surveyed people, almost 85% of respondents are maladapted, which is manifested in an assumed type of response, chaotic nature of activity, a tendency to take a defensive position, externality, and escapism. The refugee syndrome manifests itself in fear, insecurity, hopelessness, increased anxiety, reduced activity, difficulties in adapting to a new environment, a sense of guilt, a feeling of destruction of inner harmony and the world, unwillingness to start all over again, and aggressiveness. Accordingly, the systematic, comprehensive approach to the organization of psychological support and the search of innovative ways of integrating information developments into the process of developing constructive coping strategies to overcome stressful factors in the context of adaptation of forcibly displaced people to the new realities of life are important in the socio-cultural aspect. The intensive development of information technologies and the integration of elements of augmented reality in various spheres of life provides an opportunity to use the appropriate potential in solving topical issues of preserving psychological well-being, developing stress resistance, and constructive coping strategies for the behavior of forcibly displaced people under the conditions of adaptation to a new socio-cultural environment. The work examines the issues of reintegration of forcibly displaced people and their development of constructive coping strategies of behavior as a predictor of effective overcoming stresses. The main goal of the work is to analyze the effectiveness of the implementation of augmented reality technologies in psychocorrective training aimed at the development of constructive coping strategies for the behavior of forcibly displaced people. The vector of innovation in interdisciplinary research is analysis of the features of the integration of augmented reality into traditional educational and psychological correctional technologies, development and testing of the program with elements of augmented reality, constructive coping behavioral strategies, vector of successful adaptation of forcibly displaced people, which includes 4 blocks: motivational, emotional, intellectual, regulatory, behavioral, and reflective ones. Implementation of a correctional program with elements of augmented reality in the individual and group form of psychological counseling of forcibly displaced people. In recent decades, the pioneering technology of augmented reality has been actively introduced into psychological research. Researchers at King's College London discovered then in 2012-2015 24 scientific articles were published about the use of augmented reality technologies in psychological practice. The new work shows that in some cases, for instance, for the correction of behavioral personality disorders, AR works no worse than traditional cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. Using augmented reality technologies, it is possible to bring an individual's internal processes and experiences into the external virtual environment. In different areas of psychology, there are techniques that offer a person to imagine themselves in an uncomfortable situation and perform certain imaginary actions in it with the help of a psychologist. In the simulated situation, the client observes their behavior on the site and tries different self-regulatory methods. Accordingly, expanding the experience of using augmented reality will make it possible to work with various client requests as effectively as possible and provide psychological support to various social groups. The concept of coping, overcoming, was first introduced into scientific psychology in the works devoted to the crisis of growing up. It was done in 1962 by the American psychologist Murphy. He defined coping as an attempt to constructively transform a situation that poses a real threat to an individual, draining their internal resources. A person uses coping strategies based on their experience and own resources. Through coping strategies, a person is able to react to stress to manage the present stressor. The presented model of the mechanism of development of constructing coping strategies of personal behavior is based on a dichotomous approach. The appropriate model is the basis of the psychocorrective program implemented at the formative stage of our research. The dichotomous approach to classifying strategies for coping with psychological stress distinguishes between preventive and operational strategies for coping with psychological stress. Thus, Matheny showed that the essence of the strategy of preventive coping with psychological stress is to prevent the impact of a stressful situation either by changing the cognitive assessment in the perception of the requirements of that situation or by increasing resistance and resilience to the impact of stress factors. Constructive coping strategies of behavior in internally displaced people in the process of overcoming stress factors are aimed at actively transforming the stressful situation, overcoming dramatic circumstances, resulting in a sense of growth of their own capabilities, self-confidence, strengthening themselves as a subject of their own life. As a result of military aggression and in order to create a safe educational environment for participants in the educational process from areas where active hostilities are ongoing and regions that are under temporary occupation, in particular certain communities of the Zaporizhia region since May 2022, Bogdan Khmelnitsky Melitopol State Pedagogical University has been relocated and legally re-registered in Zaporizhia. As a result, approximately 85% of teachers and 67% of students became internally displaced people. As a result, the need to implement a study aimed at developing constructive adaptation strategies for the behavior of displaced people in the realities of our university has become particularly relevant. The interdisciplinary empirical research was conducted by teachers from the Department of Psychology, Computer Science, and Cybernetics at Bogdan Khmelnitsky Melitopol State Pedagogical University. The study included 40 students who were internally displaced. The sample was randomized, graded by way of stratification. The empirical research was conducted in 2 stages. The staging stage involved conducting a psychodiagnostic examination in an online format using Google Forms. The ascertaining stage of the study was carried out in September 2022. The formative stage of the study involved the development and testing of the program Constructive Coping Strategies, a vector of successful adaptation of internally displaced people. The program was implemented during October-November 2022 on the basis of the educational hub of the Melitopol Open Center for Assistance exactly here. Program participants were divided into 2 subgroups. An experimental group where students took part in the training program Constructive Coping Strategies, a vector of successful adaptation of internally displaced people with elements of augmented reality technologies based on the BYOD concept. A control group where students participated in the program Constructive Coping Strategies, a vector of successful adaptation of internally displaced people using only traditional psychological technologies and practices. The empirical study has shown the dominant coping strategies among young people. According to the results of data processing, avoidance-oriented coping prevails in 40% of the respondents. That is, the desire to avoid the influence of a stressor by replacing an unpleasant activity or situation with a distraction to communication, immersion in one's own world, and unproductive activities. This indicates a significant decrease in the adaptive capacity of respondents under the influence of a stressor. In addition, 62.5% of them choose distraction as an avoidance, and 37.5% choose social distraction from those events and situations that are stressful for them. These students are able, in stressful situations, to avoid solving their problems by avoiding contact with others, to show aggression toward them, aimed at social isolation and the use of defense mechanisms. The diagnostics has revealed that 25% of the total number of respondents in stressful situations choose task-oriented coping. These students in stressful situations are aimed at the rational analysis of the problem, creation and implementation of a plan to solve a complex stressful situation. In 35% of students, such dominant coping stress behavioral strategies, which are focused on emotions, have been found. For these students, it is not typical to perform specific actions aimed at solving stressful situations. This style of behavior is manifested in the form of attempts not to think about problems at all, involving others in their experiences. According to this survey, it has been found that in the existing realities of constant physical and psychological danger, only 7.5% of respondents experience moderate stress, and 57.5% of students experience a high level of stress, of which 20% of respondents experience severe emotional and physical stress, and 15% of respondents have a complete depletion of adaptive energy. Thus, according to the results of that survey, the above quantitative and qualitative results allow us to talk about the mostly negative emotional state of internally displaced people and the dominance of non-constructive behavioral strategies. The high level of stress and depletion of adaptive resources, the increased level of anxiety, the negative impact of emotional reactions, of the personality on activities and interpersonal relationships are the consequence of forced change in the daily life of internally displaced people. Based on the model of the formation of constructive coping strategies of personal behavior, we have developed a psychocorrection program, Constructive Coping Strategies of Behavior, a vector of successful adaptation of internally displaced people, which included the constructs of augmented reality technologies. The aim of the program is to develop adaptation behavior as the means of increasing the personal resources of internally displaced people. The integration of a set of augmented reality elements into each block of the program has been innovative in the relevant program. The implementation of augmented reality elements is carried out using mobile application and is based on the concepts of bring your own device, that is, the use of personal devices, tablets, laptops, smartphones in the psychocorrectional process, and mobile augmented reality education. The program consists of 4 structural and logical blocks. Motivational block. Formation of motivation for transformational learning, development of readiness for self-change and self-development. Emotional and intellectual block. The use of augmented reality technologies for the purpose of studying the individual characteristics of the emotional and behavioral sphere of forcibly displaced people. The development of emotional and intellectual abilities for emotional self-regulation, external regulation of emotions, understanding of emotions. Regulatory and behavioral block. Implementation of elements of augmented reality in order to develop skills and abilities of effective self-organization of activities and life space in new conditions. Development of self-confidence and constructive strategies for overcoming stress. Reflective block. Implementation of mobile applications with elements of augmented reality in order to analyze transformational changes in the emotional and behavioral sphere, design the future on the basis of the developed competencies. The introduction of augmented reality components into the training program allows not only to visualize space, certain states, and the system of behavior, but also makes it possible to create polymodal stimulation, which allows on the one hand to actualize the cognitive and intellectual capabilities of an individual, on the other hand to model an adaptive system of emotional and behavioral reactions. According to the results of the formative experiment, we observe an increase in the number of respondents with the dominance of task-oriented coping strategies. In the experimental group, it is 72.5%, which is 3 times more than at the ascertaining stage of the study. In the control group, it is 45%, which is 1.8 times more than at the ascertaining stage of the study. According to the results of the experimental influence, also in both groups, there is a decrease in the number of respondents with dominant coping strategies focused on emotions and avoidance. However, in the experimental group that participated in the training program with the application of augmented reality elements, the dominance of non-constructive behavioral strategies decreased by 2 times. As a result of the program implementation, the positive changes in the levels of stress and stabilization of mental states of the individual have been observed. According to the secondary survey, it was found that the experimental group significantly reduced the level of expressed emotional and physical stress, 15%, the manifestation of severe stress, 5%, and there is no complete depletion of adaptive energy of the individual. At the same time, the percentage of respondents, 25%, who have a complete absence of stress has increased, which is due to the development of constructive strategies to overcome it and the development of self-regulation skills. The dominance of moderate stress, 55%, is directly related to the respondents' perception of the current situation of military operations as threatening and unstable. However, the possession of constructive skills to overcome stresses does not cause excessive emotional and physical stress. Positive results have been also found in the control group. Thus, according to the results of the formative stage of the study and the integration of augmented reality elements into the training program, we have found positive dynamics in the development of constructive coping strategies of behavior in internally displaced people, reducing the level of manifestation of destructive stress, mastering the skills of emotional and physical self-regulation, which actualizes the emergence of adaptive resources of the individual. Augmented reality technologies are becoming a new effective method of psychological influence, which is expected to lead to a revision of the categorical apparatus of psychological science. The analysis of augmented reality technology shows that it has a number of methodological features that distinguish it from the methods of traditional psychological influence. Experimental studies conducted with the help of augmented reality technologies show that they can be used as an effective tool in psychotherapy and psychological rehabilitation, as well as for solving problems of organizational psychology, clinical psychology, and security psychology. The empirical study statistically has proven that AR technologies, in combination with traditional forms of psychological influence, have a stronger motivating and corrective effect. This impact is explained by the effects of immersion and presence in real time, reinforcement of adaptive mechanisms, and expansion of the behavioral and emotional repertoire of the individual. The use of augmented reality technologies contributes to the actualization of the psychocorrectional effect of training programs by updating the individual approach. Respondents are much easier to learn constructive behavioral strategies and adaptive mechanisms for responding to stresses due to direct involvement in the simulated situation and through graphic abstractions and three-dimensional models must a new experience. AR technologies allow to expand the experience of orientation in 3D game virtual space and use the opportunities provided by the interface for psychocorrectional influence. The priority direction of further research is the identification of the impact of augmented reality technologies on the psychophysiological characteristics of the individual under conditions of stressogenic factors. Thank you for your attention.